Wednesday show. Wednesday show. Wednesday show. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another spectacular, wonderful, wacky, something, I don't know, something else that starts with W. Spectacular didn't start with W. Wednesday show. Hello, Dino's King. Good little dinosaur. Hey, you're the king. Um, hey, howdy, hey, welcome to the practice round. How's everyone doing? Are you guys doing good today? Hopefully everyone's doing well. Hey, Matt, how you doing? Man, I was thinking about you today. I was just wondering how Matt's doing today. So, Matt, hopefully you're doing well. So today we're going to be going through. We're going to be. It's tough to talk right now. I have 3 ideas for the show. I'm not going to lie. I've got 3 ideas, and yeah. Rex, you're alive. Rex, this Rex. I'm good. How are you doing? Hello. You're working overtime, so you've got the clock below you. That's how I would take it. So today we're going to give you guys 3 options. Three options for the Wednesday show. I know this is kind of unusual, and we've never really done this before. We've given you 2 options before, but we're going to give you 3 options today. And you guys are going to go through and you're going to vote for which option you actually want to talk about tonight, because it's kind of a weird day. Because my original idea was, what we're going to do is we're going to continue doing our Disney 100 series. The notes are in here. So we're going to do our Disney 100 series, continue with that we've been going through and talking about. However, then I was with my friend Alex. Say hi, Alex. Hi. Well, Alex is in the chat room. And she actually already said hello. So I was with my friend Alex today for a little bit over at Magic Kingdom, and she was like, "Oh, you could do a Star Wars thing." And I was like, "Oh, that's we could do like an episode about Galaxy's Edge and talk about some of the cool, fun finds there and some of the details." And then also on top of that, then I was walking to my car, and the Disney Plus announced that today is 5/3 day, and 5/3 is 53, which obviously would be, Herbie the Love Bug. So today's actually Herbie Day as well. So we got May the 4th tomorrow. We got Herbie Day today. And then we also had our original plans for the show as well. So we have so many different things that we could have been doing for the show today. So I decided, what we could do is we could just kind of throw it to you guys. And at one point, actually, I was even talking about just going straight to my, or staying at the park and doing an entire episode from the park. But my phone was kind of acting wonky. And the battery's just draining like crazy these days. So I was like, I'm not going to do that one. And I was actually supposed to be interviewed on another episode, someone else's podcast today. So I was going to come home, and then the person who was doing that, she got sick. So then that got canceled. So then I was like, oh, do I stay at the park? Do I go home? I'm not really sure. And yeah, it's been a kind of a crazy day. Nothing has gone the plan that I was going to, originally have. But at the same time, I'm good with whatever we want to do, because I figure we're going to throw this at you guys. Throw the original plans out the window. It's in my lap. So let's do this. We're going to do a vote. You guys are going to figure out exactly which episode you want to do. So we can either do continuing our Disney 100 series, where we're going to be talking about different things that happened in different years about Disney, going by your specific votes. We're going to do either that or a Star Wars Galaxy's Edge type of episode. We're going to go through and talk about that. Or we can do the third option, which is a Herbie the Love Bug themed episode. And we're going to talk about Herbie, the history of Herbie, and a little bit more, which I don't have any notes on those second 2 options. I will say that. So everything will be coming right off the top of my head of everything that I do know. But all 3 of those should fill at least an hour as well. So throw your votes into the chat room right now, and whichever one has the most votes by the end of it, that's going to be the episode we're going to do. And then, of course, we'll have some more time too. So if you guys want to go through and talk about different things as well, we can do that as well. 3 in honor of Herbie, 333333333. We'll give you guys about a minute here to throw your votes in. 3. And I'm also going to do a fun fact. I was actually thinking about this when I started thinking, oh, we could do a Herbie themed episode. I was thinking the amazing thing about a Herbie themed episode is the fact that we did a Herbie themed episode, and it was episode number, I want to say 9 of, keeping in mind, this is episode 715 we're doing right now. So episode number 9 was a Herbie themed episode. Everyone's saying Herbie. Holy cow, I did not think Herbie was going to win. So let's do it. We're going to start the 715th episode, Herbie themed episode of the Wednesday show in 5, 4, 3, 2. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 715th episode of the Wednesday show. Today is May 3rd, 2023, and because it is May 3rd, we're going to be doing whatever deals with number 5 and number 3 next to each other. 53, 53, 53. Herbie the Love Bug. That was a terrible whistle. We're going to be talking all about Herbie the Love Bug, the history of Herbie the Love Bug, the behind the scenes of Herbie the Love Bug, and of course, my favorite thing that no one really even knows about, the secret television series about Herbie the Love Bug. But of course, before we get to that, let's talk about our news for the week. First off, thank you everyone who's been joining us for our Saturday in the Park. If you didn't already know, every single Saturday on my YouTube channel, we do a live broadcast from someplace found throughout the Walt Disney World Resort. You never know where we're going to be, but I guarantee you will be someplace found in Walt Disney World. So make sure you join us every single Saturday at 1 o'clock Eastern Time over on my YouTube channel. We always have a lot of fun, so make sure you join us every single Saturday. Also, speaking of YouTube, we are continuing to do our daily Disney videos every single day, hence the word daily. Actually, I was at work the other day, and someone did not understand that daily means every day. They thought that daily meant every 3 days. I don't know how they got that logic, but no. In addition to that, we are also doing a Disney short every single day on there as well. Our current subscriber goal is, or total is 2,781 subscribers. As always, if we get more subscribers as we go through here, we will continue going into extra innings for the show tonight. And even with those extra innings, maybe we'll go through and talk about Star Wars Galaxy's Edge or do at least one of our 100 things. So if you know anyone who's not subscribed yet, make sure you send them over to subscribe as well. And of course, as always, tonight's episode is sponsored by, let's do the Herbie edition. Wait. It's all about the mouse travel. Jizz hands. Make sure you stop by. It's allaboutthemousetravel.com for all of your Disney travel needs. All of their services are absolutely positively 100% free. So make sure you book with them for your next Disney vacation. Okay, so first off, show of hands, how many people out there have seen Herbie the Love Bug? Anything with Herbie in it, or if you know of Herbie. Herbie is probably one of the most famous cars in the history of movies. There's a lot of different famous cars out there in the history of movies. Obviously, you got things like the DeLorean, aka the Time Machine from Back to the Future. You've got the Jurassic Park Jeep. Then you got like television series like Kit from Knight Rider. But my personal opinion, Herbie the Love Bug is best. I've been absolutely in love with Herbie since I was a little kid. So let's do a little bit about my history of Herbie, because a lot of people I don't think really understand my history of Herbie. They know I drive Herbie, but I don't think they know the whole backstory of Herbie and why I drive a Herbie car, besides just being a massive Disney fan. When I was like 2 years old, I became obsessed with the Herbie films. So back when VHS tapes were a brand new thing, and they would have different movies on television, what people would do is they would record those shows on a VHS tape, and then you could watch it for all your livelong day. So one of the movies that we had was Herbie the Love Bug. We also had Herbie, I was going to say Herbie Fully Loaded, but that's not the one we had. Herbie Rides Again, and we also had Herbie Goes to Monte Carlo, and half of Herbie Goes Bananas. We did not have the first half of it. I used to watch these over and over and over until finally I had one of those little push carts. You know, like those little cars where you could just like, you know, you moved your legs and it moved forward. It was just 4 wheels and you would just push yourself. It was a little blue car and I named it Herbie. I had it so my parents put on the back Herbie, and it was my car. It was my Herbie the Love Bug. And then when I was a few years older and I got a tricycle, I named it Herbie. And then a few years later, when I got a bicycle, I named it Herbie. I was obsessed with Herbie the Love Bug my whole life. So eventually what happened was I started to drive a car, which we would lovingly refer to as the Chick Magnet. It was a Subaru Legacy with a spoiler. It was the family car for my brothers. So my oldest brother drove it, then my next brother drove it, and then I drove it for quite a few years until eventually it would break down. And I had to go off and buy my own car. So the first car that I was going to go get was several different things, like a CRV was one of the ones I went to. So I was going around car shopping, hopping in different spots. This is like all of a sudden became not even a Herbie episode. This is like the Brent Dodge backstory. This is my origin story of how I got to where I am today. So this was, to be specific, this was April of 2009. So in April 2009, I started going through and I started looking at all these different cars. And while I was going through and looking at these different cars, I went to this one dealership, which was a Honda dealership, and it also had a Volkswagen dealership that was part of it. And while I was there was one car that was all by itself. And it was this like off-white. It wasn't completely white. It was an off-white car. And it just sat there in the parking lot. And I saw it and I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like Dean Jones right now seeing Herbie for the first time. I feel like this car needs me. But I did some other test drives. And I remember leaving, and I did a test drive with the Beetle. And I remember leaving and thought, I kind of want the Beetle. Like I always wanted a Herbie, and I always said back in the day that I was going to get a 1963 Volkswagen Beetle, much like the actual Herbie in the films. I was going to get a 1963 Volkswagen Beetle, but obviously that's not the most reliable car. And a 2008 Beetle, new Beetle, would be a little bit more reliable. So I saw this car in the parking lot. I went home, and I was going back and forth about whether or not I wanted this. And my brother, who is not a big Disney person at all, he's my older brother, but not my oldest brother. Him and I were talking about it. And I vividly remember, I was actually just telling the story to someone at work the other day. I remember him saying to me I was like, maybe I should get the Herbie. And he was like, yeah, I think you should. He's like, you should get the Beetle. And I was like, well, I mean, I would put the 53 and the stripes on. And he's like, yeah, you have to. And I remember the moment thinking, I think I have to. So I purchased the Volkswagen Beetle, the 2008 Beetle, and I transformed it into Herbie the Love Bug by buying some stickers from the UK. I found some guy who's selling them on eBay. I went through on eBay and I purchased these stickers, and then I went to a car shop, actual like shop where they actually do paint and all that other stuff. And I said, I would like you to put these stickers on, please. And they said, of course we can. So that eventually led to. Here we go. I actually got a picture of me and Herbie here. Things are falling. That actually led to me with Herbie right here. So Herbie and I would actually come down here together back in 2010. I got Herbie on April 30th, 2008. And since then, we've been inseparable. I see him every day. He's like the most constant. Actually, it's crazy. I was actually thinking about this not that long ago. He's like the most constant thing in my life. Like Herbie, I see Herbie every single day. I don't see every person I know every day, but I do see Herbie every single day. So Herbie is legit like the most constant person or machine in my life. So let's talk a little bit about how Herbie became Herbie. So Herbie actually originally came from a book which was called Car Boy Girl or Boy Car Girl. Boy, girl, car. Anyways, it's a story about how a boy and a girl meet because of a car and they fall in love. But the car is not just an ordinary car. It's an extraordinary car. The extraordinary part about this car is it actually would go through and have it so it was coming alive. It would actually come alive and go through, and it would be one of the most amazing things that anyone could ever see because this car actually had personality. It actually expressed expressions. And it was a car. So it just didn't make any sense at all. However, right before Walt Disney passed away, Walt Disney actually purchased the rights to this story. And he wanted to have it so he could actually make his own film about this actual movie. And he would call it The Love Bug. But originally, it was not going to be called The Love Bug because they didn't actually know what kind of car it was going to be. So Walt Disney himself held an audition for Cars. That's right. He held an audition for Cars. Now, if you've ever gone over to the Walt Disney Studios, in the Walt Disney Studios, Walt had an apartment that was on the third, or an office on the third floor. It overlooked a small little street, and what Walt did was he decided to test something out. He put a bunch of different cars out in the street in front of his office, and him and different people who are going to be working on this film would try to figure out exactly which car would be the best car to use. And while they were while they were watching the different people walk by, they noticed that not everyone, but almost everyone would stop at the Beetle and pat it on the top because it's such a cute little car. Look at it. I always tell people it's a manly car, but it's a cute little car. So because everyone was stopping at the Beetle and giving a little love, then they decided, you know what, that's going to be the star of our film. So they decided to change the name of the film to The Love Bug. At that point, it didn't really have a name. It was just going to be called Movie. So when they were going through and trying to figure this out, unfortunately, shortly after they casted Herbie, they also then they also cast Dean Jones, but shortly after that, Walt Disney would actually end up passing away. So Walt Disney never actually saw the film come out. However, a lot of people would say that it's the last one that he had his hand on in some way, shape, or form, because he did help a little bit with the casting, a little bit with the story work before he would actually pass away. And most of the stuff that he actually worked on was just like bare minimum. So it was like he had his hand in it, but it wasn't like full on in it, because the film would actually come out about 2.5 years after he would pass away. He passed away in December of 1966. The film would come out in March of 1969. So when the film started to go through and try to figure out exactly how they were going to go through, I can't think of the person's name right off the top of my head, because like I said, this episode was literally voted by you guys at the start of this episode. Right now, I feel like I'm doing a pretty good job of remembering everything that I've remembered. However, the one fun fact that I cannot think of off the top of my head is the number 53. So number 53 is actually after one of the pitchers for the Los Angeles Dodgers. I can't remember the exact pitcher, but it was a very popular pitcher for the Dodgers at that time, and that's how they decided to come up with 53, because some of the people who were working on the film were fans of that actual pitcher. In addition to that, they decided to have, so the car was white, red, and blue, American colors. And then, of course, at top of that, they decided to get an all-star cast. They brought in people like David Tomlinson, who was best known as George Banks in Mary Poppins, Dean Jones, who became a Disney staple in the late 1960s and early 1970s. He was everything from Blackbeard's Ghost to The Ugly Dachshund, Snowball Express, and so many other great films. And then on top of that, we would also have Buddy Hackett being the mechanic. Buddy Hackett, obviously a hilarious comedian from back in the 1960s. Eventually, he would also do another film, a little film with Disney in 1989, which was called The Little Mermaid, where he voiced Scuttle. So the film came out in 1969 and actually was a huge success. Because it was such a huge success, they decided to have it so they wouldn't just have one film come out, but they would have an additional 4 films come out. Let's talk a little bit about those. So they decided to connect it so all these different films would be connected to one another. So in the original film, we had Dean Jones, who played Jim Douglas. Jim Douglas was a down in his luck race car driver who didn't really know what he was doing in his life. He just he wanted to be a race car driver. However, it really wasn't working out for him, and most people were saying, you got to get away. He was walking past an auto shop one day, or a car salesman one day, and he saw this little car in the window, but he didn't stop for this car. He actually stopped for a much nicer and much sportier car. While he was there, the little car came out, and when it came out, then David Tomlinson's character kicked it, and he was like, hey, what are you doing? And he decided that instead of, because he defended it, Herbie decided that he was going to follow Jim home. Eventually, they accused Jim of actually going through and stealing Herbie. And then eventually what would happen is he would go through and purchase Herbie and have it so he was transformed into a race car. Eventually, everyone started to realize that Herbie was in fact alive, except for Jim Douglas, who refused to believe it. He just thought that he was great at being a race car driver, and Herbie had absolutely nothing to do with it. Herbie, by the way, was named after Tennessee Steinbeck's uncle, Herb. So As the film would go on, eventually Jim Douglas would realize that Herbie was in fact alive, and the two of them would work hand in hand to eventually win the big race that would claim Herbie as its own forever and ever and ever. Until we get to the second film. So in the second film, Herbie Rides Again, which would come out a few years later, starred Helen Mays. Helen Mays? Right? Maybe? Yes, I think so. Don't quote me on it. But she would be the grandmother, Mrs. Steinbeck, who would also be Tennessee's aunt from the first film. So if you look at the first film, they all have a connection on how the character of Herbie goes from film to film to film. So in this one, he would go through, and Tennessee would be given him to his grandmother, or his aunt, who was also living in the same fire station that they lived in the first film. So she would go through, and the problem in this one was Alonzo Hawk was going through and trying to get rid of all the different buildings in the area so he could build his own shopping mall. Modern day problems. So she refused to actually get up the place because she had lived there for years and years and years. And eventually Herbie would come to the rescue. Now, eventually Herbie, along with a bunch of other Beatles, would go through and take down Alonzo Hawk, who would run away forever and ever and ever. Which brings us to a few years later when we would have our third film, which was Herbie Goes to Monte Carlo, where once again we get Jim Douglas, played by Dean Jones. And then we also have Don Knotts, who plays Wheelie Applegate. I think I'm getting all these names right. And the two of them are in Monte Carlo to do a brand new race film. Side note, the first film, The Love Bug, my favorite film. Second one is Herbie Goes to Monte Carlo. Just a classic. I love the ones where they actually have like the racing and stuff. Like, I think it just makes it a little bit more fun. Anyways, that's besides the point. So in the third film, they were in Monte Carlo. And while they're in Monte Carlo, there is also a jewel heist that's going on. And the jewel thieves decided that they're going to put this massive diamond inside of Herbie's gas tank, and they're going to come back later and take it. However, what they don't realize is Herbie's alive, and because Herbie's alive, he would actually go through and escape with the jewels. So the entire film takes place with a jewel thief going on, along with some racing going on, and overall a lot of fun. Plus, it's the first time I ever heard yodeling in my entire life. Yodel, 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 hee-hoo. Such a good film. And so eventually we get to Herbie Goes Bananas, and Herbie Goes Bananas. Herbie is going on a cruise, but not a Disney cruise, so it's not as exciting. In Herbie Goes Bananas, we are now having it so Herbie's being passed down to Jim's nephew, who is also a race car driver, along with his friend, and they are going down to pick up the Herbie car in Mexico. And along the way, of course, chaos ensues, and they get thrown off a cruise ship because of Herbie and a little boy who calls Herbie Ocho, because 5 + 3 = 8. The film is, without a doubt, my least favorite of the 5 films. It's good. It's just not great, but it's not the best thing in the world. So later on in the 1980s, what they would actually do is the first ever television series that themed completely around Herbie the Love Bug. So in this film series, we would actually have it so it was Herbie and Jim Douglas now in suburbia teaching they were actually driver ed teachers. So they would go through and have it so they were teaching driver's ed. And then, of course, they would just have it so there was these different episodes where Jim was trying to fall in love, Herbie was trying to set him up, and very basic television series. I think there was only 6, maybe 8 episodes that ever aired. I have seen them all. I found them all on YouTube a few years ago, and I watched all of them right in a row. Much like Herbie Goes Bananas, not a great series. You can tell why it did not last very long, but at the same time, I still think it's pretty good. Eventually, Herbie would go on a long hiatus until 1997, when there would be a made-for-television film called The Love Bug that would come out in ABC. Remember the Sunday night movies back in the day with Michael Eisner? He'd be like, "Oh, today we're going to be talking all about this new film." Ha 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 ha. And they would have a film that was made specifically for the thing. And in this specific instance, they would have the Love Bug. So in The Love Bug, we had Dean Jones coming back once again. It's always great to have Dean Jones back. And Dean Jones was going through a history of Herbie. It wasn't that much of an original film. It was more like a remake of a film, but at the same time, it was just like a bunch of highlights of Herbie throughout the years. It wasn't the greatest film of all time, but at the same time, if you're a Herbie fan like myself, it's worth watching at least once in your life, or 2 or 3 or 5, 6 times, however many times I've seen it. Totally worth it. I'll probably go watch it again tonight because now I'm curious what it was all about because it's been so long since I've seen it. So eventually we would have it so there would be another hiatus until about 2005 when we would get a brand new Herbie film. At this point, we had a brand new star in not just the Disney world, but all around the world named Lindsay Lohan. And this is my biggest pet peeve of them all. So let's talk a little bit about my biggest pet peeve of all the Herbie things in the world. It's not the fact that this was a bad movie, because actually this was a great movie. I actually think Herbie Fully Loaded is one of the best. I think it might be my top 3 of Herbie films. I think it's a great film. I like the driving. I like everything about it. I like that it goes back to the racing days. But the fact that every time I'm driving Herbie the Love Bug and someone sees Herbie the Love Bug and they point out Herbie the Love Bug, and what they will always say is, oh, like the Lindsay Lohan movie. Okay, people, if we've gone through anything tonight, 1969, Love Bug, 1973, Herbie Rides Again, 1979, Herbie Goes to Monte Carlo, 1984, Herbie Goes Bananas. We've had so many different Herbie things throughout the years, but for some reason, every person has to focus on the 2005 Herbie Fully Loaded film, and it drives me crazy because it's like there's so much more Herbie history here, and these people just toss it all aside, thinking that Herbie with Lindsay Lohan is the only one that ever came about, and it makes me so mad. Okay. So in Herbie Fully Loaded, we go through and we get a brand new film. And this time, Herbie is found in a junk lot. He has been completely abandoned. She couldn't have won an Emmy. Lindsay should have won an Emmy for that film. She can't win an Emmy because it was a movie. So it couldn't be an Emmy. It would have to be a Golden Globe or an Oscar. Emmys are for television. So in the film, we have it so she actually goes through and finds Herbie the Love Bug inside of a junkyard. Inside of the glove compartment, there is a thing talking all about how Herbie is a special car. Please take care of him, Jim Douglas. So she goes through and she's like, okay, whatever. It's just an old car. And she's just getting a new car for her 16th birthday. And then all of a sudden, next thing she knows is she is a superstar racing sensation with Herbie the Love Bug. So that kind of goes through the entire history of the Love Bug films, but we have a lot more to talk about with Herbie because it's not just about the movies. There's a lot more to do this. So let's do this. All right. So first off, let's talk a little bit about the history of Herbie in the theme parks, and let's also talk a little bit about. Well, here, do you guys? We'll answer. I've got a few questions that are popping up right now. But what we'll do is we're going to throw it to you guys. Would you rather have the history of Herbie in the theme parks, or would you rather go to the history of what did not come to the theme parks for Herbie? Because there is a very interesting backstory, which we can talk about as well. And hopefully you guys are entertained because, like I said, no notes for this one. I had no idea. I really honestly had no idea that we're going to be doing an episode about Herbie tonight. But I'm actually very happy that we did because I always like talking about Herbie. Okay, so while you guys try to figure out if you guys want the history of the theme parks first or if you want the what never happened first, let me know. But let's go through here. What is your top 3 favorite Herbie movies in order? I want to say The Love Bug is my favorite, but Herbie Goes to Monte Carlo is a very close second, and the two of them do switch off quite a bit. One of the things that I do really wish that I would have had a little bit more of is because it always comes down to Don Knotts and Buddy Hackett, and I think both of them are amazing comedians. I absolutely love both of them so much. I think both of them do amazing jobs in those films. So it really kind of comes down to the two of them. I do like the fact that in Monte Carlo, Herbie gets his own little love story too with Giselle. Giselle. You remember the lady in the film? Giselle is not happy with that. Giselle. I decided to name my car Giselle. And then my third favorite would be, I think, Herbie Fully Loaded. I love Herbie Rides Again. Herbie Rides Again is like number 4, but it's like right on the brink of the top 3. I think the storyline's great. I think the acting's great. I think everything about the film is great. It's just I wish there was a little bit more action like we had in the first ones. But the first ones I still think are amazing film. I love Herbie. Like The only one that I'm not like a massive fan of that I'll watch like every now and then, but I watch the other ones a lot more often, is Herbie Goes Bananas. I like the movie. I just don't love the movie. The best part about that movie is we've got some great comedians in there. We got what's her name? Loris Leachman? Dolores Leachman? Wait, what's her name? I can see her face. She was on Dancing with the Stars a few years ago, and everyone like went crazy. Loris, DeLorean. I can't think what her name is at all for life of me right now. Oh yeah, well, while someone tries to figure that out, maybe Clarice Leachman. Thank you. Okay, so we're in the parks. A lot of people are saying the parks. Cloris Leachman. Parks. Okay, so let's do a history of the parks. Then we're going to talk about something that never came about because there was at one point going to be a Herbie the Love Bug attraction. Can you imagine how many times I would have gone on that thing? So let's talk a little bit about the history of the theme parks. So starting off back in the well, you know what? Let's even go back further. Let's go to 1969. So in 1969, we would get Herbie the Love Bug, and Herbie the Love Bug would be a massive hit. So many people absolutely fell in love with the film. And what Disney decided to do was they decided that they were going to go through and have a brand new experience at the parks. And they brought it for one time and one time only. And it still kills me that I was not alive for this, because I personally think that this would have been the greatest thing of all time. So what they decided to do was they decided to have a very special parade at Disneyland for Herbie the Love Bug. So in order for you to participate in this parade, you just had to have a Volkswagen. Not even a Volkswagen Beetle. You just had to have a Volkswagen. So what they did was they invited anyone and everyone who had a Volkswagen Beetle to come down and actually drive through the park. So you'd actually drive down Main Street, USA, up by the castle, over by Small World, and backstage, and be part of the Herbie the Love Bug parade. I think it would have been one of the coolest experiences of all time. Like I said, they only did it one time. However, because of it, Herbie actually started to make more and more of a staple inside the parks. So a few years later, we would have Walt Disney World opening up with the Magic Kingdom. And when this park would open up, we decided to have it. So why not bring Herbie into the actual park himself as part of the parade? So going down Main Street, USA, and through Frontierland over at the Magic Kingdom, we would actually have Herbie the Love Bug himself. Well, not the actual one from the film, but we would actually have a Herbie the Love Bug with eyes. And it always bothers me because people always be like, oh, do his eyes wink? Well, the only time that Herbie's eyes ever winked in any of the films was going to be actually at the parade. So he never really winked in the films. Although they did like a little special effect thing in Herbie Fully Loaded, but that's besides the point. So Herbie never had eyes. He never had eyelids, even though a lot of people think that he did. But in the parade, he actually would have it. So from 1973 until about 1991, I want to say, but I could be wrong on the year, maybe 1995. Herbie would actually be part of the daily parade. So he would actually be going down Main Street, USA, and winking at different people. In addition to that, they decided to actually include a few mini Herbies in there as well. So they actually had these small little motorized vehicles that were literally like the size of like a soapbox derby car, like just extremely small, or like a small little go-kart. And inside the two that were both Herbies, they would have Chip in one and Dale in the other. And Chip and Dale would drive down Main Street, USA in these fake little Herbies. And they were literally like, their heads are coming out of the roof. And it's hilarious. If you've ever seen a picture, let's see if we can actually find a picture of this right now so you guys can just see it. Let's do Chip and Dale in Herbie parade car, Magic Kingdom. Aha. There you go. If that's not the greatest thing you've ever seen, I don't know what is. Look how many people are there, too. So anyways, they would have it. So they would go through and have it, the thing. This is the true statement. I am a godfather to a Dino King. So they would go through and have it so Herbie, along with Herbie and another Herbie, would go down Main Street, USA. Eventually, that parade would retire, and when that parade would actually go through and retire, what they would end up doing is they would go through and actually put that into a brand new hotel. So in the 1990s, we started to have a brand new idea happen at Walt Disney World, which is called the Disney Value Resorts. Now, prior to this, we didn't really have value resorts. We just had mainly things like contemporary, Polynesian, etc., etc., etc. My family has decided that you are a walking encyclopedia. Thank you. So when they go through, I'm pretty proud of myself right now that we came up with this idea 33 minutes ago, and we've been going pretty strong so far. So, I honestly was not sure if we'd be able to talk about Herbie for a whole hour without any notes prepared, but I'm pretty happy with what we got so far. Also, if you guys have any questions, start throwing questions in the comments too, because we are going to be wrapping up our park section pretty quickly. There, we don't have a whole lot to talk about in the parks, but we're gonna go through it. So, anyways, we had this brand new concept called the Value Resorts. The Value Resorts would open up with all-star movies, all-star sports, and all-star music. Now, with these three different specific things, we would have it so each one of them was themed around a different specific thing. So we had, like, obviously music would be different things like Broadway, jazz, calypso music, etc., etc., etc. Over at sports, we would have football, basketball, baseball, etc., etc., etc. And then over at movies, we would have 5 different movies or movie brands that were specifically focused on. Actually, all of them would have sequels. So we would have Mighty Ducks at one section, 101 Dalmatians another. Obviously, we had 101 Dalmatians and 102 Dalmatians with Glenn Close as well. We would have the Toy Story films. We would also have Fantasia. And then the very back section, we have probably my favorite section of any Disney resort anywhere in the world. Like, hands down, I absolutely love going over here. And that would be the Love Bug section. So in the Love Bug section, in the very middle of the entire section, we do have Herbie the Love Bug there in all of his glory with some eyelids. And I know what you're thinking. Well, you told us there are no eyelids except for the parade. Well, the vehicle that's actually found here is the actual parade vehicle that was in all the different parades through the 70s and 80s and into the 90s. So when you actually go over there, you are looking at a piece of Disney park history with that specific thing. Now, while you're also in this specific area, one of my favorite things to look at here is, first off, you got a half of Herbie on one side, half of Herbie on the other side. One side says Herbie, the other one says the Love Bug, from where I'm looking. So you would have those two there. If you look at the ground, there's all these different little nuts and bolts that are kind of engraved into the pavement. And of course, that would be a nod to the mechanics that would work on Herbie, people like Tennessee Steinbeck. And I always want to say Tennessee Williams, by the way, but it's Tennessee Steinbeck. And Willie Applegate from the films. And then in addition to that, we will have 4 different clapboards that are found scattered around. Now, the 4 different clapboards are actually part of the stairwells that would actually take you up to the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Oh, I just dropped Herbie. 2nd, 3rd, and 3rd floor. And there's only 3 floors on those buildings, but it'll take you up there. But the cool thing about this is when you actually look at these clapboards, the 4 clapboards actually pay tribute to the first 4 Herbie films. So one of them says The Love Bug, one of them says Rides Again, one of them says Monte Carlo, and the other one says Bananas, all referencing the different things. On all 4 of those, they do have 4 different directors. One of them's Mickey, one of them's Minnie, one of them's Donald, and one of them is Daisy. And then on top of that, they'll also have the production date. And the production date will be things like 369 for The Love Bug, which came out in March 1969, and then the other respected dates of the opening films as well. So in addition to that, they would have it so Herbie the Love Bug would be becoming more and more popular, and that's what eventually would lead to the 2005 film with Lindsay Lohan. But at the same time, we started to work on something brand new over in Disneyland Paris. So over in Disneyland Paris, they started to work on a brand new park, and that brand new park would bring in a brand new attraction. And the attraction would be none other than Lights, Motors, Action. So if you have any history about Disney's Hollywood Studios, then you're like, oh, Lights, Motors, Action. That was at Disney's Hollywood Studios. It was at Disney's Hollywood Studios. However, in 2005, Disneyland celebrated its 50th anniversary. So when Disneyland celebrated its 50th anniversary, what they decided to do was go through and have it so every single Disney park in the world would receive a gift from a different Disney park in the world. For instance, if you go over to Epcot, you have Soarin'. Now, Soarin' would be a gift from California Adventure, which had Soarin' for about 4 years prior to that. So that was the gift from Disneyland to Walt Disney World. In addition to that, over at the Magic Kingdom, we would get a brand new stage show, which would be the gift over there. At Disney Animal Kingdom, we received Lucky the Dinosaur, who would be from Tokyo. And then over at Disney's Hollywood Studios, we'd be receiving Lights, Motors, Action from Disneyland Paris's sister park, which was the Walt Disney Studios Park. Also, side note, if you've never been to Walt Disney Studios Park, at the point when this came out, not the most exciting park in the entire world. I still really enjoyed the park when I went out there, but at the same time, it started off as a very basic park because they just wanted to have it so it kind of, they wanted to have a second park. If you've ever watched the Imagineering story, I think it's episode 5. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's episode 5. Kind of goes through like the dark history of Imagineering back in the early 2000s when they were just kind of like, open new parks, open new parks, open new parks. It doesn't matter if they're good or not, just open up brand new parks. And that was one of the cases over at Disneyland Paris. So one of the exceptions of the awfulness there was a brand new stunt show over there called Lights, Motors, Action. Now, Lights, Motors, Action had it so it was filming a brand new movie with all these different car chase scenes and stuff. However, one part that they would bring in would be none other than Herbie the Love Bug. So Herbie the Love Bug would come in because he was one of the favorite movie stars of all time, and they wanted to have it so they could introduce him to the entire park. And after he would go through, he would eventually go down into a tunnel and explode and then come out and split into 2 different pieces. The show was so successful over there, it was one of the only successful things at the park when it first opened up over at Disneyland Paris, that they decided that what they're going to do was bring this same attraction over to Disney's Hollywood Studios. Disney's Hollywood Studios would have the same attraction open up in 2005, and when this would open up in 2005, we would get the exact same segment where they would say, hey, we're going to bring out one of the most popular Disney characters of all time, Herbie the Love Bug. And Herbie would come out, he would, just drive around the stage. Eventually, would go down. He would split it to 2. So when you were going through and looking at this splitting into 2 different things, if you've ever seen the Herbie films, you know that Herbie has split into 2 a few times before. In the original Love Bug film, he split in 2, but he split down this part of the car. So the front half and the back half were separated, but not the sides. So we would actually have it to the sides. It would be the first time ever there. But that was not the only place in Disney's Hollywood Studios where we would have a Herbie the Love Bug reference. In addition to that, over at the Studio Backlot Tour, we would have Herbie the Love Bug found all around. In fact, if you went over to the Love Bug ride, if you would go over to the Studio Backlot Tour, you would see not just 1, not 2, but sometimes you would see up to 3 different Herbie cars that were actually from the films. One of them would be from Herbie Goes Bananas, where it would be him after he went through the bullfight. You had another one where it was him kind of torn in half, and then another one that was him in pristine shape. So Herbie the Love Bug went through a massive history inside the Disney parks when he was actually inside the parks. However, we also have a time where Herbie was almost in the park, but just didn't seem to reach his full potential. Now, this is probably the most promising attraction ever that I wish would come into being, but it kind of came into being, but I wish it would have came into being as a Herbie attraction. So let me explain. So in this attraction, you would actually be boring into your very own Herbie the Love Bug. What? So yes, you would go into a Herbie the Love Bug, and when you would enter into your Herbie the Love Bug, you would go through so many different chaotic scenes. You'd be going around San Francisco because that's where Herbie the Love Bug was actually set, or that's where the Love Bug was said, and that's where Herbie Rides Again was said. And then eventually they would go on to different locations. But in the first 2, we would have it so it was San Francisco. So they would have it so Herbie was going up the different hills, going down the different hills, and you were along for the ride. Now, while they were going through this different thing, they came up with a concept that was so far ahead of this time because this was back in the early 1990s when they're coming out with this. And then this would actually become realized years and years later. But the idea was after you go through all these different scenes, eventually you would get to a point where you would stop and then another Herbie would come right next to you. And yes, that other Herbie was also filled with guests. And yes, the 2 of you would go off and go on a race with one another. So this idea eventually would turn into Radiator Springs Racers, which is, of course, is a huge hit over in Cars Land at Disney California Adventure. One of my favorite attractions of all time, like without a doubt. And if it was Herbie, it'd probably be a whole lot better. But actually, because it does. I feel like it does work better with Radiator Springs Racers because you're not in the same car. Like the idea of having two Herbies next to each other is probably like not the greatest idea, but at the same time, it would have been really cool to race on a Herbie the Love Bug. So eventually it would go through and say, you know what, this just isn't working. They didn't really have the technology to completely pull it off. And they decided to just completely scrap the idea and eventually use some of their ideas for a little attraction that would be known as Test Track. And then, of course, Test Track would be the groundwork for what eventually would become Radiator Springs Racers over in California. So that is our brief and kind of long, but kind of crazy history of Herbie the Love Bug in honor of May 3rd, aka 5-3. Does anyone have any questions out there? Well, you guys throw questions out there. I need a drink because I feel like I've just been like rambling on about Herbie for the last 45 minutes, which I haven't. Does anyone have any questions out there? Any at all? We went into my history with Herbie and how I got to Herbie. Yeah, there's something about Herbie that I've just always loved, and just Beatles in general. I've got not here. I've got like little die casts of Beatles kind of scattered around my condo. There's a red one over there. There's a blue one over there. There's a black one up here. There's times where I go to Walgreens. Like I've gone to Walgreens a few times over the last like 10 years, and if like I need like if I have a sore throat or whatever, and I'm going to get like cough drops or whatever, it's right next to the die cast of the cars. And every time I'm like, ooh, is there a Beetle? And for some reason, if it's like one that I don't have a color of, I'm like, oh yeah, I got to get this. And then I always get home, I'm like, I don't need this, but I kind of do. Oh, wait, no questions? Does anyone have any questions out there at all about Herbie? I saw someone post about how they love the music. I love the music in the movies. Yes, I absolutely love the music in the movies. I think there is, and this is not even a joke. Like this is not me exaggerating whatsoever, because I think I actually did it today even. There are times where I'm driving my Herbie and I'll literally be whistling the Herbie song, the do 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 do. With stars back in the day signing with Disney to make a certain number of movies. Yeah, so quite a few different stars would. So Dean Jones had a contract. Actually, I think Kurt Russell was the last person to have a full-on contract with Disney in Walt's era. Kurt Russell his first one was Follow Me Boys, and then he would eventually do things like The Computer Wore Tennis Shoes, Now You See Him, Now You Don't. And then he became massive movie star, and then he still does Disney movies to this day. So Kurt Russell is currently in the most movies with Disney throughout the years. Second is Johnny Depp, who I think is one film behind him. But yeah, Kurt Russell did like Miracle just a few years ago, or I guess that was like 18 years ago. Oh, I'm getting old. That feels like not that long ago. But yeah, Dean Jones would go through and he would actually sign multiple films with Disney. So that's why he got The Ugly Dachshund and Blackbeard's Ghost, and then obviously things like Herbie. And he would just go through and he would come back and eventually get to when he came back to do Herbie Goes to Monte Carlo. He did not have the contract anymore. He just came back because he genuinely loved the character of Herbie. He absolutely loved the car. So Dean Jones would actually be the person who appears in the most Disney films, the most Herbie films. He would appear in The Love Bug. He would be in Herbie Goes Bananas. And then he would also be in the Love Bug special. And then he was also in the TV show. Now, one of my favorite things about the TV show, and I highly recommend to watch just even the first episode of the TV show, because it's like I said, it's not the greatest TV show, but if you want to, expand your Disney knowledge, you have to watch it at least once. In the TV show, there is actually a song, like a theme song. It's a TV show, so there's a theme song, and it's like, it's Herbie, he's my best friend, and the song is sung by none other than Dean Jones. Are there any original cars loved today? Yes, there's actually quite a few that are still around. So for the films, there were multiple cars that were used. I want to say in the first one there was 8. Don't quote me on that, but I think there was 8. And then eventually they would have it so in Herbie Goes Bananas, I want to say there was 12 of them. One of them is still in the ocean. So there's a scene where they drop Herbie into the ocean, and as the story goes from what I've read about the film, they tried to retrieve the car and they just never could find the car. So Herbie is someplace out in the Atlantic and they just don't know where, or maybe the Pacific, but they still don't know where he is. So if you ever go scuba diving, look out. You might see Herbie down there. So a few of them would make their way. Actually, quite a few were over at Walt Disney World for quite a while. I would not be surprised if there are some that are still kind of hanging out at different locations around the area. If you ever went to Planet Hollywood before it became the observatory, back at the original Planet Hollywood over at Disney Springs, one of the Herbies was actually hanging from the ceiling. It was actually one of the ones that was actually used inside the films. In addition to that, if you go over still to Herbie, not to Herbie, you go to Disneyland Paris to this day over at the Studios Park, at the Walt Disney Studios Park. When you go into the Walt Disney Studios Park, the first thing you do is you go through the soundstage area, and there's some gift shops on your left-hand side. There's a food court on your right-hand side. If you go through that area on the top left in the gift shops, you can actually find a Herbie the Love Bug up there. That's actually one of the ones that was actually used in the films as well. Like I said, over at Walt Disney World for years and years and years, we did have multiple Herbies that were kind of hanging out over here. Now we don't really know where those are going to be or where they've been hanging out at. A few of them were found they were located where Galaxy's Edge now sits. So there might be one that's still backstage. Last time I knew, in 2009, when construction was already going on for Galaxy's Edge, one of my friends who used to work at Hollywood Studios, so if you go to Disney's Hollywood Studios, you know what? I was going to say, I can try to explain this, but this is going to be a much better way for me to show you. We're going to pull up the Disney Parks map. It's not going to show us the exact location. Oh, no! I just got called back for Tron. I knew it was a long chance that I was going to get on Tron today, but okay, so it's not going to show us exactly here at the map, but if you look at this map, there we have Toy Story Land, where we can see that right now Toy Story Midway Mania has a 5-minute wait. What are we doing here? Over there on your right-hand side is going to be One Man Stream, and then that grassy area, this massive grassy area right here, that is a parking garage. Now, if you've ever gone to studios, then you've probably seen this massive parking lot over here. This parking lot over here is the entrance. Focus. Now, the area that's down here is actually the cast member parking lot. However, if you are a cast member who works in like the business sense of things, then you park in this grassy area. But in reality, that grassy area is a 5 or 6 level parking garage. So my friend used to park there when she had a corporate job over there at Disney's Hollywood Studios. And she said for years and years and years that you could actually still find one of the Herbie the Love Bugs from the studio backlot tour that was out there. So it might still be out there. It might be worth trying to figure out a way how to jump over a fence or two and see it. But yeah, Herbie is still around. We just don't know how many are still in existence. I know that the Walt Disney Archives actually has one as well. I have seen that one a few times in my life. So yeah, Herbie still exists. We just need to find more of them. And also, I'm actually part of a group on Facebook that you can only join if you have proof that you own a Herbie. I'm trying to think what the group's called. It's like Herbie Drivers or something like that. There's 200 and some people that are part of this group. And all of us, I haven't posted in there in years, but it's literally you go through and it's just people posting with their Herbie, aha, look at this, look what I got. But one of the people on there was talking about one year how he actually went through and he actually got one of the original Herbies from Herbie Rides Again. and he went through and he got like all the proof from Disney itself, showing him that this was actually an original Herbie. So really, really cool. Yes, there's lots of Herbies that are still around. We just don't know where all of them are to this day. Oh, wait, any other questions out there before we wrap this up? Let's check out, take a look at our subscriber count here. We started off at 2,781, refreshing right now, and we are at 2,781. So we didn't go up at all. So sadly, we will not be going into any extra innings tonight. Maybe I'll run over to Tron. I'm tempted. I'm not gonna lie. Are you going to MGM for the 4th? I don't have a reservation. I could go after 2. But at the same time, tomorrow, I want to go over there at some point tomorrow. I just don't know what time's the park even open until tomorrow. I want to say it's 9:30. The only thing I'm worried about for Tron is it takes about 30 minutes for me to just get over there. The park closes in 35 minutes. Like to go over and then go through security and everything else like that. Oh, no, never mind. My window's closed now. I got called back at 9:15. So I never saw the thing until just now. So sadly, Studios is open till, I want to see tomorrow. Studios is open till 10 tomorrow. So I might go over there tomorrow. I'm going to see Guardians of the Galaxy tomorrow over at Disney Springs. So after the movie gets out, my plan was if I have time, I'll run over to Magic Kingdom or Hollywood Studios. So depending on what time that film actually gets out, it all comes down to how many trailers are there, and how long the actual film is. But I'll probably head over to, let's see here. How long is Guardians of the Galaxy 3?
The running time of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is 2 hours and 29 minutes.
So 2.5 hours. My thing's at 6:15. So that brings us to 8:45 plus about 7 hours of trailers. That brings me to 6 in the morning. We'll see. I might run over to Studios after the movie and try to hop on Star Tours and Smuggler's Run and Rise to Resistance at some point or another. So yeah, I don't think today. As much as I would love to run over and try to do Tron, I just don't think I'm going to make it because my window's closed and they've been very strict about that. So if I get over there, by the time I get over there, I might have time to hop on one ride and one ride only. So I got on a total of 14 rides already today, so I'm good. Not being able to get on any more else for today. Okay, so we are going to wrap up tonight's episode right there. As always, tonight's episode is sponsored by, oh, wait, hurry. Drive us over. It's all about the mouse travel. Jazz hands. Make sure you stop by. It's allaboutthemousetravel.com for all of your Disney travel needs. All their services are absolutely, positively, 100%ly free. So make sure you book with them for your next Disney vacation. I'd like to thank everyone out there for joining us once again tonight. I hope you guys enjoyed our very impromptu episode about Herbie the Love Bug. And as always, if you've not already done so, you can still order your copy of A Closer Look and A Closer Look and A Closer Look. If you can't find the links, just send me a message. I'll send you the links. And of course, as always, remember that anything can happen if you let it. Until next time, have a great week, everybody. Bye-bye. Goodbye now. Goodbye. Goodbye now. Bye-bye. Goodbye now. Are they gone? Are they gone? Oh, good. My cheeks are just killing me. I just can't stand this kind of